everyone. I want to welcome you to Group Practice Profits Podcast, where our goal is to help you increase your group practice profit, reduce your group practice overwhelm, and help you have more time off with your families. I'm here with my friend and colleague, Joe Babanese from Uncommon Practices. Hi, Joe.
Hi, Casey.
We're very excited to bring our new podcast to you where we're going to be talking about all things group practice. And we've been doing this for a while. Joe, tell us about your practice.
My practice. Well, I've had my group therapy practice called Relationship Institute was a group practice since about 1999. And after making lots of mistakes, trial and error learning, since I didn't have a podcast like this to rely on, we now have 27 therapists working in 3 locations and annual revenue over $2 million.
I want you guys to hear that. He went from just he and his wife to 27 therapists, 3 locations, and over $2 million in revenue. So this is possible, not overnight, but it is possible. And our goal is to help you reduce the mistakes that Joe and I started that we encountered when we started our practices the first time, our group practice.
And Casey, we should say, we personally know, I'm thinking how many people over $1 million in revenue now? It's quite a few. I used to think that was an unrealistic number, but there's just people all over North America that are bringing in over $1 million in revenue. I know people as high as $5 million with group practice.
That just blows me away because remember the days when I first wrote Be a Wealthy Therapist, the idea of a therapist having any money was phenomenal. It was really an outlying idea. And here we are with probably over 100 people that we know that are making that kind of money. So I'm very excited to be here with you. And for those of you that don't know me, I'm Casey Truffaut with Be a Wealthy Therapist. And I also have a group practice in Orange County, California, the Relationship Center of Orange County, where we have 2 locations at present. And I started my group practice in 2013. My original practice was in the 90s. And then in 2013, I said, whoa, this is a way to make some money and help more people than we ever could by ourselves. And we know you guys know that already. That's why you're here. You're on the leading edge. And so what we wanted to talk to you about today in our first issue of this podcast is the 6 roles that the group practice owner has, because we're wearing a lot of hats.
Yeah, Casey, before you get into some of that, I just want to give a little prelude, which is a lot of us business coaches in the therapy field have recommended the book by Michael Gerber called The E-Myth and then The E-Myth Revisited. And one of the insights in that book, he talks about that there's 3 separate roles for a business owner. There's the technician, the one that does the skill, like doing therapy. There's the manager that kind of keeps everything organized in systems. And then there's the entrepreneur, which has the vision for the future. And what I think you've done brilliantly is you've expanded upon Michael Gerber's original work and made it very relevant for the field of psychotherapy and group practice.
Well, thank you, Joe. I really think that when I was coaching a lot of group practice owners, I found that overwhelm was the predominant emotion that people seem to talk about. And where I decided that was really coming from was hat switching. So we have all of these roles that we're performing, not simultaneously, but almost. So we're putting on one hat and then having to take that off and deal with another issue, back and forth, back and forth. And that hat switching, if we're not prepared and planning for it in ways that we're going to talk about, can cause us to be exhausted. And so I think that if we can identify those 6 roles for you and help you come up with strategy to make things easier in each role, that is going to be the secret to having more time off. So let's jump right in. I have 6 roles. You were talking about Michael Gerber, and he's certainly an inspiration to me as well. And he talked about the visionary role. And the visionary role of a group practice owner is really, where do we want to go? So some of the decisions that you've made as a group practice owner, as a visionary is, and you can revisit these at any time, and that is, what is my brand going to be? What is my niche going to be? Who am I marketing to? Am I going to be insurance-based or cash pay or a hybrid? And am I going to have contractors or employees? All of these are initial decisions that you've made as a group practice owner that are going going to affect your upcoming coming few years and how you envision the future. Now, you can always go back and readdress those. Maybe you've been cash pay for a while and you're considering taking some insurance, or maybe you've been taking insurance and you've decided you don't want to do that anymore. So there's lots of changes that you can make to your vision, but I think it's really important that you have a vision and that your people, your clinicians that work for you, understand and buy into your vision, or the mission, as we might say, as a military person might. What's the mission, and can we all agree in the mission? One of the problems I see, Joe, with visionaries, though, sometimes is I work with group practice owners that have what I call a runaway visionary. And this is somebody who one day says, oh my goodness, group practice, that's awesome. I'm going to hire a bunch of people. I have more referrals coming in than I can deal with. I get them in there. That's exciting. And now I'm bored. I think I want to go create some online programs. Oh, I don't know how to do that. So I better go hire a coach for millions of dollars to figure that out. And I'm not selling any of those. So maybe I'm going to go write some books. And there's really no focus on what is the practice and what are we trying to do. And I think that's one of the things that you've done brilliantly with the Relationship Institute is you knew from the beginning what your brand was, what you were going for, and you've been able to build that over time. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, we started off, my wife Shirley and I, wanting to help people create healthy relationships, hopefully sooner and faster in their life than we did, and with less money spent on therapy than we did. And that was our vision in the beginning. And then we expanded that to be healthy relationships with your children, with your families, with yourself. But we always kept that umbrella topic of relationships, and that served us well, as we've expanded. And we've also tried over the years to add different services, some of which have stuck and some of which didn't work out. But it was always starting with that basic umbrella of relationships, and that was always our mission, to help people learn how to do that better.
And I think some of the mistakes that we see people making are they get excited about one vision and they're going in that direction. And then they hire a great clinician who also wants to work in a totally different brand, totally different. We're an autism clinic, but I want to have my clinician wants to do eating disorders. And so now we're trying to market multiple brands. And I always like to say a confused mind says no. So if you try to confuse people with who you are, it's not going to work out well. So spend some time, if you haven't already, and revisit your vision. Make sure your actions and what you're doing are lining up with the vision that you have.
And I would also say, Casey, is make sure one service is functioning smoothly before you add others. The other thing I've seen people do, as you said, with the entrepreneur mind going crazy, is to start with therapy and then add medication and then add yoga and Pilates and then add massage, and none of them are really functioning smoothly in an integrated way. So if you're going to add more services, make sure you do it in a way that makes sure everything's running together well before you add the next one.
Very good point. Very good point. So again, if we're looking at the 6 CEO roles of the group practice owner, the first one that we tackled is visionary. The second one is one that you're all familiar with, and this is clinician. And in Michael Gerber's words, this is the technician. This is the one who actually does the work. And we know you're a good clinician, or you wouldn't keep getting the referrals that you're getting. So bravo and bravo to you for that. Now, where does that get us in trouble, Joe, with the clinician role?
Well, the clinician role is the cornerstone of where you start. But if you're seeing too many clients, there's just no time to work on the business. You're always in the business. And that was one of the crucial shifts I made early on, to make the painful decision to not see a client who wanted to see me because I had to carve out time to work on the business. But that becomes an essential part of the growth of a group practice.
And that's a really good point. And it's such a good point that I think we're going to devote our second episode of this podcast to that very topic, because I think that's a mindset that it's hard for many of us to get past. But again, it's 1/6 of your roles as a CEO person. The next one is operations role. An operations role is everything from answering the phone, scheduling the clients, getting them their intake paperwork, billing, all the way through termination and potential reactivation. This is what I call the client journey. And where possible, the thing that Michael Gerber taught us is you want to create systems wherever you have actions that you're going to take again and again and again. Joe, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's a really crucial part of a smooth running engine for your group practice. I remember one of my business coaches said to me, I like to use mind maps. And he said, I want you to make a mind map of every single step from when the phone rings as one system, all the way to the point where money goes in the bank and the client's terminated. And I think when you're a solo practitioner, you sort of do all these things automatically without even thinking, because you've done them usually for many years. But when you have to take it out of your own head and make it explicit for somebody new, it really becomes a little bit of an OCD exercise. We have to break down every single step, but it's very valuable to document that, and that ensures that the operational side functions smoothly. And you get, just like Michael Gerber talks about, whether it's McDonald's or your group practice, you have the same result every single time.
I remember in one of those books I was reading where somebody said that they had some kind of brain injury and they were learning how to tie their shoes again. And it was literally a system that they had to create. Okay, the first thing I do is this, and then I do this, and then I do this. And I think that's what we want to do. And because we're so in our clinician role a lot of the time, and we're spending our time there, we forget that having a consistent way of answering the phones, having a consistent way of reaching out to clients that have canceled, those kind of things, we tend to have them fall off the edge of the cliff. And again, that we're going to be talking more about that in our second episode. But operations role, so we have the visionary, the clinician role, and the operations role. And again, the operations role is, as Joe said, taking everything on that client journey from the first conversation, intake, call or email or text, all the way through termination and potential reactivation, and creating a system. And that is the only way you're going to get what we've called passive income. And I still think that's a misnomer, because we're working really hard for that income. It's just that there are times when money is being made in the office and we're not there.
Hey, Casey, one other resource I'd like to mention for our listeners is the book Work the System by Sam Carpenter. And he makes a great point in that book about how everything in our life is a system, whether or not we realize it and whether or not we consciously created it. Everything we do, every result we create or don't create is a system that we're doing. And that's a great companion book to the E-Myth book by Michael Gerber.
I think it was that book where he was talking about driving. You know, everything in driving, and you come up to a red light and you hope everybody's obeying the same rule when you're coming up to that red light. It's a system. So that was really a good book too. I love that. Then we have 3 more roles, and one is the marketing role. So you as a solo practitioner got a lot of referrals because you were good at what you did, and maybe you were really good at marketing. Maybe you hired Joe for your AdWords and you got a lot of people calling you, and then you decided to open that group practice. We still need to keep that marketing engine going. Joe, can you talk a little about the 3-legged stool? Because I just think that's such a fascinating metaphor.
Yeah, the idea that there's 3 things in a group practice that we want to keep in balance. And my friend and colleague Ken Ury came up with this. And the idea was that the flow of referrals, number of intakes, is one part of the stool. Second part of the stool is the office space available for the therapy to happen. And the third is the number of clinicians on your staff to see the flow of intakes. And so when any of those get out of balance, there's going to be some sort of chaos. There's going to be some sort of fallout from that you have to quickly resolve and get back into coherence. And ideally, you want to see that trend of one of them getting out of balance a few months or more in advance so that you can take steps proactively to keep things flowing smoothly.
Yeah, and I think that Ken was a really beautiful metaphor that he came up with, and I thank you and he for sharing that with me. And you've always said it's driven by referrals. So the more referrals that come in mean you need to hire another person. The more people you hire, the more space you're going to need. At some point, you get more space because you've got more clinicians, you're filling them up, and now we're going back to the referrals again. So that's the way that you build over time to the $1 million and $2 million practice, if that's your lifestyle goal.
Right. And that's an important point. We're not saying that everybody $1 million is necessarily where you should get to. It's just that for most people to get to a point where the group practice is generating enough profit to make the work worth it, most people end up wanting to get somewhere between 600,000 or 700,000 and $1 million or more.
Right. So it's not really about, again, going back to that, it's not about being greedy. It's not about trying to make as much money as you possibly can. It's about getting enough revenue coming in that if something happens, such as a therapist leaves or somebody's out sick, then you're still making all your operating expenses, you're making payroll, and you're still so. And in an upcoming episode, we'll also talk about how to get to that point, and also about what happens before and after that, because you will have more overwhelm, angst, chaos, if you will, before you hit that mark. Okay, good. We'll talk more about that in an upcoming one because Joe's got some metaphors with rockets that I love. Okay, so we'll do that soon. And the next role that I want to talk about, we talked about visionary clinicians, operations, marketing role. We have two more. The first one is finance. And admittedly, we've worked with thousands of group practice owners now. And I think finance is one of the ones that people seem to struggle with the most. If we ask our clients, what was your revenue last year? What was your profit last year? What was the percentage that you paid your team? Most group practice owners could answer one or two of those questions, but to really have all those numbers at their fingertips at any one time, most don't. And honestly, that's where we make our business decisions going forward, is looking at our existing numbers, especially when we're in that early stages of the group practice, that first $500,000.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we've seen, once we help group practice owners track their metrics carefully, they're in such a greater position of power and insight to make good decisions going forward with the group practice. And also, I think it shines a light on what's really happening. I think there's some denial that goes on. I was talking to somebody recently. She was saying, well, I know the numbers are helpful, but it's kind of painful to look at. She said, it's like getting on the scale when I'm on a diet. And she said, but I've been doing it a lot more lately. And I realize how really important it is to really know what's going on.
And I love that metaphor because it's so true. But if we only get on the scales 2 months after we start the diet, it's hard to get excited about the progress. But if we've already lost 10 pounds, then that's pretty significant. If we're not getting enough referrals, and that's one of the things we're tracking, and all of a sudden 3 months later, you're up even 20% on your referrals, that's awesome. That's worth celebrating. So we want to figure out what is your next action step that you want to take in these roles. And I still have one more role to do. But a lot of times people will call us up and say, should I get more space? And we'll say, what's your percent of occupancy right now? How long does it take to get an evening appointment right now? What is your profit right now? If people don't have answers for that, it's hard to say, sure, go get a new space.
Yeah, one other thing, Casey, about the finances, and it's kind of maybe a funny segue, but finances are very emotional. Yes. And it's interesting that the part of our brain that most has to be analytical also elicits sometimes the most emotion. And group practice is a very emotional thing. And I know when in the first 10 years of my group practice, what I realized is when I was doing well, I thought I was doing better than I was. And when I had a bad month or year, or when my state led the country in unemployment for 4 straight years, I thought it was catastrophically worse than it was. So having those numbers really, really helps you to stay on track and to see what's really going on, see what your progress is, and see how good or bad things are going as you progress toward your goal.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because even as long as I've been doing this, I can still notice when that emotion comes up and have to check it. So yesterday I was looking at, we were 3 weeks into the month, and I was looking at the 3 weeks of this month compared to 3 weeks of last month. And last month was our best month ever in 6 years. So we're not quite there. We're about 12% down from last month. And I was so disappointed. I said, you know what? I'm going to go look at this month of the year last year. And we're up, I think, 44% from this month last year.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you. So, I mean, it's relative, right? And it's important that we look at all of the numbers. The other thing that looking at the finances, you really want to action step, look at your profit and loss report monthly, both year to date and each month. So if you're one of those people that at the end of the year maybe gets a profit and loss from your accountant that you don't look at, start getting that monthly. Get somebody to help you understand what that means so that you can look at it and say, okay, I've got this. And then you can make better decisions going. And that does, as Joe said, require not only tracking your income and your expenses, but number of calls per month. How many of those calls became intakes or first sessions? That's your conversion percentage. How many of those people stayed? How many sessions a month did you do? What was your net profit per session? There's a lot of things you can track. Don't overwhelm yourself in the beginning. If you're not tracking anything, pick about 4 or 5 that will be meaningful for you. And then, this is my favorite part, you can set goals. So I have goals for the number of sessions I want to do per week. So we have a goal for that. And I can pop in there and say, okay, my goal for this quarter is X number of sessions. My goal for next quarter is X plus, 10 or whatever the number is. And you can watch your progress.
So Casey, what's the 6th one?
The 6th one is mentoring. And this is being the boss. You and I talk a lot about this. And it's kind of a weird thing. If you haven't come out of corporate America, I was lucky enough to have that. And that was a blessing that came to me. But if you're not lucky enough to have that, being the boss is maybe something new to you. And so having to create systems and boundaries and rules and ways that you want to work can be a little difficult, and managing people can be a little difficult. So make sure that you get support. One of the things that has been really helpful for me is to recognize that each person that works for me, they're kind of coming into my family. I mean, they're my work family, but I'm responsible for them in terms of making sure that their clinical skills are good, making sure that I give them whatever training they need to do the job that they need to do, whether that's learning how to retain clients, how to open and close a session, because many people who have not been in private practice don't know how to do that. And so when somebody comes into our place, we start from day one, once a week, whether they're licensed or not, they get peer supervision, where somebody who has really good retention rate sits down with them and looks at 2 things. How do they conceptualize a case? And then how do they manage the client contact so that we're rebooking the client? As you know, there are therapists who just sit there at the end of the session and go, okay, let me know if you need anything else. I'm here. And then there are other people that say, let's get the next three appointments on the books, or is this a good standing appointment for you? This is how I would like to help. You have a beautiful way of telling people the course of therapy so that on session 3, when they want to quit, you go back through and say, remember in the beginning, in the initial sessions, I explained to you, this is a process and this is how it's going to work. And they go, oh, yeah, you're right. I'm not going to quit now. I recognize it's going to take time to get where I want.
All right. Well, that's a great summary of the 6 roles of the group practice owner. Thank you, Casey, for coming up with that and explaining it so well. We look forward to sharing a lot more insights on this podcast as we go forward. And we welcome your comments and feedback.
Thank you. And I just invite you to take those 6 roles and look at which one do you think you might be the weakest in, and what's an action step you can take to improve that. And we wish you amazing group practice success, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye for now.
Bye now.